Resuming debate, the honourable member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Speaker, it's an honour to rise in this place to speak to Bill C-97, the Budget Implementation Act. And Speaker, I want to say I'm profoundly concerned. The federal budget is a government's opportunity to present their plan for the country and its economy. It's their opportunity to demonstrate to Canadians that true political leadership is the art of the possible. It's concerning that rather than accomplish the possible, things that could help Canadians prosper, this Liberal Party refuses to recognize that more and more Canadians are just getting by and not getting ahead. Canadians need budget measures that at least acknowledge their struggles and help provide them some relief from escalating costs of day-to-day life, not ones that simply continue the Liberals' long history of tax and spend policies that instead hurt families, businesses, and the sustainability of government programs that people rely on. Again, in this budget, there is no plan. Instead, Canadians are getting tax increases that only make their situation worse. There's no question that over the past 4 years, Canadians have suffered under a Liberal government that misses opportunities, mortgages our children's futures, lacks a plan and neglects the needs of workers and families. So let's talk about what concerns the constituents I represent in Flamborough-Glanbrook and what they've been feeling as far as Liberal neglect is concerned. In the greater city of Hamilton, thousands of Stelco workers and pensioners have been forced to deal with great uncertainty and have really struggled after the company moved into creditor protection on 2 different occasions in 2004 and 2014. These are Canadians who have or are at risk of losing their dream of a dignified retirement after decades of hard work. What I've heard from every pensioner who's reached out to me on this issue is that they have serious concerns that the bankruptcy process puts investors ahead of pensioners. Speaker, bankruptcies at Sears and Nortel over the years have resulted in similar dire circumstances for their pensioners. Thousands of Sears employees were out of work when the store closed in December 2017, and yet there's no real pension protection for employees who had been there 10, 20, 30 years or more. Speaker, a pension is deferred wages. That it's even possible to lose deferred wages is totally unacceptable. The Liberals promised action years ago. More empty promises in this budget do not a plan make. Speaker, our previous Conservative government took an important first step when we brought in changes that require companies to fulfill their pension obligations when they seek creditor protection. I'm happy that change was made because it was a crucial first step towards protecting pensioners. However, there are many more steps to take. That was just the first, and more needs to be done. It is possible to make changes to our laws and regulations to improve protection for pensioners. The question becomes, what changes should be made and how do we make those changes? This is not a question that one party has all the answers to. Speaker, it's not my intention to oversimplify the challenge before us. I remind my colleagues that political leadership is the art of the possible. Millions of Canadians rely on their pensions. This issue is too important to avoid action because the problem is too complex, nor should members be divided down partisan lines. We have to make this change possible. That's why in 2017 I called upon the government to charge one of our parliamentary committees to review the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, the Companies Creditor Arrangements Act, and the Investment Canada Act. Speaker, that was 18 months ago. I strongly believe that a parliamentary committee is the ideal place to begin. A parliamentary study allows members of all parties to examine important statutes and regulations and provide their input on the matter. In hearing from stakeholders, public servants, legal and industry experts, a committee study allows members to determine where exactly the issues are and what exactly is possible. All of the testimony would be a matter of public record, meaning that those arguing for and against changes would be subject to scrutiny, and rightfully so. The committee members then have the opportunity to make recommendations to the government as to what problems need to be addressed and how they could be addressed. Having previously chaired the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology and understanding the issues that come before it, that would make a lot of sense. Unfortunately, when my Conservative colleagues brought forward a motion to begin such a study at the committee, the Liberals voted it down. Instead of taking advantage of the power of a parliamentary committee, the Liberals blocked that study and made it clear that looking at new ways to protect pensioners was not a priority for this government. And in 18 months since, we've essentially heard nothing from the Liberals regarding pension protections. A lot could have been done by now if the Liberals had the will. Ironically, in the latest budget, the Liberals committed to giving pensioners greater peace of mind by enhancing retirement security. Quote, is this vague commitment what pensioners have been waiting for all these years? The Liberals aren't prepared to take the very possible and meaningful steps to follow through on those words. While moves toward greater transparency in the process are well and good, the budget falls far short for actually providing concrete protections for pensioners when their company fails for credit protection. Speaker, it isn't just the official opposition that sees this legislation as woefully lacking. The Canadian Association of Retired Persons and the Canadian Federation of Pensioners agree that Bill C-97 falls well short. When I met with United Steelworkers a few weeks ago, they made it abundantly clear to me that this was their #1 priority because they're still workers and pensioners who are struggling and stressed out and concerned about their future. Speaker, this issue should transcend partisan boundaries. My Conservative colleague, the Honourable Member for Durham, when he introduced Bill C-405 to begin making changes to better protect pensioners, said that securing the retirement and pension security of Canadians is in another time that we should work together on all sides of the House to bring certainty to hundreds of thousands of Canadians in their retirement. The Honourable NDP member for Hamilton Mountain, who has offered his own private member's bill on pensions as well, has referred to the issue as a legislative crisis. Even the Liberal Minister for Seniors, who's also the member of a neighbouring riding of mine, Hamilton West and Castor Dundas, told the CBC that more study was needed on pensions. That begs the question, Speaker, if the position of the Liberal government is that more studies needed, why did they vote down a Conservative motion to study pension protections at committee? I think Canadians deserve an answer to that question, Speaker, and the government better have a reason that's better than petty partisanship. The financial security and safety of our retirees is far too important for that. Speaker, I reiterate my belief that a complete review of legislation governing pensions and insolvency is needed, one that considers the perspective of all stakeholders, workers, business leaders, industry experts, civil servants, bondholders, banks, suppliers, who, by the way, Speaker, get victimized very regularly as well when a company goes out of business. Small suppliers who have, say, a handful of employees are forced into bankruptcy and their employees lose their jobs because they're so far down the list as well. But they should be part of the stakeholders that come before a committee, and so many more, that can give their testimony in regards to how bankruptcy should be handled and the priority of which those claims should be made. This is not and never will be an issue that only one party can solve on their own. The Liberals didn't want dialogue, and it's reflected in this bill because their proposals are not only inadequate, but fail to even broach the crux of the issue. This is not an issue that can be meaningfully addressed in a massive omnibus budget bill. Speaker, I implore the Liberal executive to allow committees to do what they do best. The issue requires an approach that allows members of all parties to take the time to have an in-depth debate on this specific issue without the looming threat of time allocation to get a budget through. Pensioners work hard for decades to earn a dignified retirement, and I can tell you, Speaker, that I'm certain that my colleagues right here in the House who are vested with a pension would scream quite loudly if all of a sudden that was limited or taken away. The least we can do as elected representatives of Canadian workers and pensioners is take the issue seriously and provide meaningful changes to protect them. While we may not be able to make all stakeholders completely happy, it is possible to do much more and better for workers. Let's get this on the front burner now before another 18 months go by. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Yukon.
I'd like to congratulate the member for taking up this topic. I think it's a very important topic. It's always been a pet project for myself, so I totally agree with him that this needs to be studied and worked on. The member of Science and Industry has outlined in question period a number of the steps that the government is working on and taking related to this. But I'm curious as to the member, because he's obviously given more thought to this than most people. Obviously, a study would be great and get all those opinions. But if he could give one or two ideas of his own that he's already thought of, because he's thought so much about this, that might help us in a program that would help protect pensions of existing pensioners.
The honourable member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
I want to thank my colleague for the question. It was given in a spirit of collegiality, and I appreciate that because this issue is so complex. Like, I think there's a number of things that we could do, Speaker, but I think that's why we need to get everybody before the table. Bondholders will have a real problem with the security of the funds that they have invested in the company, and they'll want to make sure that they can get their investment out. Banks are going to come to the table, and they're going to be concerned about the fact that their risk, their liability is going to be increased if they are not right at the top of the list, and they're going to be concerned about that and make claims, as they have to probably many members here, that they'll have to charge more for credit, and maybe even credit won't be as accessible because their liability will increase for any new measures that might take place. So I think the reason why I said the first step should be that we have very clear and concise testimonies, because the general public needs to know where everybody stands. And that's why in my speech, Speaker, I put that for those who would argue for and against, the public would clearly see what the issues were and whether people were, how would I say, strong-arming brinkmanship to try and keep things status quo, or if there was a reasonable effort to come to some kind of compromise to make sure that those deferred wages that people sometimes wait for a decade or two or three are actually honored.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague, who I have great respect for his speech. Mr. Speaker, I got a message from Linda Nickerson from Parksville. Her husband has been sick with diabetes, and medicine has been going up. Linda planned well for her retirement. She invested appropriately. So did her husband. The medicine costs have gone through the roof. They've sold their house. They've downsized to a trailer. They're still having a tough time making ends meet, living on just CPP and OAS. And Mr. Speaker, they're calling for the government to invest in a national pharmacare plan so that they're able to survive. They're not sure what they're going to be able to do next because the costs are just going through the roof when it comes to their medicine. The Liberal government keeps making promises that they're going to deliver a national pharmacare plan. In fact, it was in their Red Book in 1993. And here they're talking about making progress. The Deputy House Leader today talked about they're making progress, but we still haven't seen a national pharmacare plan delivered here. Mr. Speaker, I asked my colleague if he supports and if the Conservatives support a national pharmacare plan so that people like Linda Nickerson and her husband and her family are able to buy the medicine they need.
Honourable member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for the question. My own sister actually had C. difficile and was on death's door one time, and she needed an experimental drug, which was $5,500 per dose. And she was fortunate that the drug company gave her special access to it, but it could have gone the other way. And so I absolutely agree with my colleague, but I want to take the opportunity for his question just to say one more thing. Speaker, this House, since I've been elected, has not taken advantage of the very power of committees. And I think one of the things that we could do on a pharmacare program would be to call all of the health ministers, all the provincial health ministers before a parliamentary committee and have the input from the provinces who actually deliver health care, and to make sure that because some of the provinces actually have a drug plan, to make sure that we could come up with a way that no one would fall through the cracks, that was fiscally responsible, that made sure that every dollar was spent well and went to those people who needed the help. I think that would be an excellent way for a committee to work and be able to bring about a plan that would be beneficial, that wouldn't encroach on provincial jurisdictions, and at the same time make sure that every Canadian had access to the drugs that they need to stay healthy.
Resuming debate. The honourable member.